United States.
That's cool.
So when you had first moved here, I guess what are your first memories of apple growing in this area? Do you remember orchards all over the county, and the first apple festival you went to?
The apple festival then, the JCs put on the beauty pageant for that. And so we were immediately involved because at that time, as strange as it sounds now, we had, the original one had just local queens, but then they started in, because the JCs also put on beauty pageants in the towns everywhere, I mean, all over the state. They were the ones that sponsored, the pageants. So it fit in that we have girls from all over the state come, and they did. Yeah. But then where did you put them up? Where were they going to stay? Mm-hmm. Right. They stayed in private homes. Oh. And so when they came, people here were kind enough to take in one or two young ladies. Mm-hmm. And you really got to know them, they got to know a lot more about Westminster than they would have known otherwise. So it was really PR that back then they didn't talk about it too much, but it was great PR for the town and the area. Mm-hmm. And then we always went to the apple orchards, and that was a very, very important part of the festival because we picked an apple grower of the year each year, and that person was celebrated. Of course, all of them were. And then just through the years, there were just so many funny things that happened that nobody would believe. One time, when they did the JC beauty pageant, they were going to have someone who still lives here play the organ instead of using a piano. Well, that was going to be really, uptown, I guess you'd call it. And they moved her organ over there to the old school. And she said, but somebody's got to spend the night with it. So my husband and one of my daughters slept on stage at the College Street School so that nobody would steal the organ.
That is funny.
So there are a lot of stories that, they don't have anything to do with anything, but they make a good tale.
Yeah.
And they're true.
So what would you say was really the obvious goal or purpose of the Apple Festival early on?
I think it was because Mr. Sandifer and the group that started it, he was not alone. He was already in politics and statewide, and I think he knew that we had something that other people did not have and was willing to go the extra mile to tell our story. And at that time, apples we were world famous. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the Groucho Marx story fits in with that because he owned an orchard. There are rumors as to whether he ever set foot on Oconee soil, but I do not know that. I wasn't here then.
How do you feel like the growers felt about Apple Festival?
Well, the growers at that time were hard-working people. And the growers, as we laughed about them through the years, and it wasn't a funny laugh, it was comical in one way, is that every year they'd say, no, I don't have a good crop. No, it's not a good crop. But they stayed with it. So, every year there were problems, but they had to have made money or they wouldn't have done it the next year.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then they got it invested so heavily that we had a niche. And the niche was that we could get apples out a week before or a month before other areas. So you got a fresh apple, not a stored one.
Yeah. Okay. Did they feel like Apple Festival was helpful to their business? And
I think they did because the visits to the orchards really showed a lot of people, and the county agent at that time was Charles Morgan's daddy, and he knew his stuff, and he was willing to tell it.
Yeah. I've seen him in a lot of write-ups.
And so the girls went there. We got pictures of them. They always ate apples. One time we took the Apple Queen to Florence to a JC convention. She was from Florence and I was, and so we went. And we carried 6 bushels of apples or something to share with the JCs. That poor girl, she ate apples so long that she was not a happy camper, but at least she got to go home to her own house to spend the night.
That's it. Cool.
Do you have any other favorite memories from all the festivals over the years?
Well, my children always enjoyed it. And there are some stories about that, because back in the early days we had, and I can't tell you the name of the town, but we had a lady who made floats, and she came out of North Carolina. And a big part of the festival was putting it together, getting sponsors for the floats, and then getting people to ride on them. Mm-hmm. Well, because the Abbotts always had one, and their girls and mine were the same age, they would ride on the float every year, and they owned some others too. But one of my children told me when she was about 5 years old, and I have a picture of her, and it might have been a Christmas parade, but she had never seen a parade. Oh. She had been in every one.
I love we have some parade footage, and that's always what's so impressive to me is the scale and all the people involved in that parade. So was that a big emphasis early on, the parade?
The parade was really big because we got out of school early.
Right.
You quit at noon on that Apple Festival Friday, and then we had the bands from the 3 high schools at that time that would always perform, but that gave them a way to perform.
Right. What other big elements were the focus early on?
Well, one thing that was always interesting was that they had the state judging of apples at the state fair.
Yeah.
And so our apples won a lot of awards through the years, and people could brag about that also. Mm-hmm. So the bragging rights for that were good. Then we did have the baking contest, which it still goes on. Yes. And it gets kind of funny because there's some people that have won it so many times that they don't come back. You want them to not come back. But one year, this might have been later because I helped with that in later years, but a lady and a man came in, and the Baptist, I think it was called the Baptist Courier, used to have a recipe in it every week. And this couple came in, and they were from another county, and they had come in on a motorcycle carrying a cake. Oh. Well, you would assume that that was a lady and her husband. It was not. They were neighbors. Oh. And she had read the article about the cake baking contest here, and he was a good cook, and his wife was handicapped, so she had just ridden up here with him to hold the cake.
Oh. That's nice.
And he won.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Well, when he came back, he brought his wife also, and the 3 of them came in a car.
Huh.
And things like that do stand out in your mind, and I'm sure other people have other, similar or different things. But that was hilarious. Because the lady that was his neighbor had shown him the recipe, and then he made it, and then he read about she had read about the Apple Festival and said, "Why don't you go?" And he did. You gonna get warm?
I'm trying to turn it off, but maybe you can, right? So what were other events around Apple Festival early on that maybe we don't do anymore or don't do as often?
Well, we had the race. People.
Yeah, the 5K or foot race.
And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And
then, in looking back, you think of things that used to be. Now I don't think you could do it this way because most of the churches use pre-written sermons.
Yeah.
But back then, Sunday was a very important part, and they asked each of the churches to some way include agriculture, God's gift to us, and most of the people did some way include it.
Okay.
And or change their sermon completely,
Yeah.
which you could do back then.
I guess I didn't know about that. That's neat. I know some of the other things we've seen in the programs, and that I know we've done in the past, not too long ago, is like the window decorating contest.
The window decorating contest, that was really a special thing. I mean, because everybody was trying to outdo their neighbor all the way down Main Street. And at that time, my father, who had moved here, was working in one of the stores. And he put together a nice one, and it won.
Oh.
And he was so excited. And, of course, whoever won was excited. But that one kind of rotated around, because in one year somebody said, I got the best idea, and I'm not going to tell you about it.
I think that's the neat thing. Everything was, and I think, was it last year before we brought back the street dance?
Yeah.
I think that's the neat one. So.
And those are a lot of fun and have been through the years.
Who else would you say was really involved heavily over the years, or other than Cecil, obviously?
Louise McClure.
Okay.
She has stayed on there or come on and off through the times. Brian White, when you go back to the beginning, Mr. Sandifer, and he has stayed with it for all of these years. And there were others that had moved away even that were very important at times.
Yeah. How does the work actually get done? Because that's a lot of work.
Well, the good thing about it was that each thing was mainly sponsored by a group, and so you had a group that did this and a group that did that.
Kind of like the JCs.
And then you would have a committee that did like the judging of the street, the window decorations. Carolyn Harris, they always did that through the agriculture department.
Okay.
And that was her job.
Right.
I mean, she did it for years.
Yeah. Do you think it, at its height, how would you have described it?
Well, it was an event that everyone came from miles around. People don't do that anymore, and of course, for the last few years, you haven't even been able to. Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing was that we were the oldest, without a skip in a year, agricultural festival in the state. And I know that was true in the early 70s. And the Peach Festival, they skipped a year. But part of the reasoning in my head that we never hired anybody to do anything. And when they got messed up was when they let industry run the show, and it didn't work. Yeah. And they went back. I mean, and then other people hired professional people to come in. Well, professional people that don't live here, they don't know how a rural area works, and most of them were from cities, and that's just not small town South Carolina. No matter where you are, small town South Carolina and all over the state is pretty much equal. I mean, you can find...
Well, I think that you can tell the thing about it that's lasted is the community focus. It's the time when everybody really comes together.
And they always have. And people that didn't participate in anything else would show up for the Apple Festival. It was kind of like Christmas on a different scale.
Yeah. What I know it was, it's important to recognize that it is the South Carolina Apple Festival. A lot of people associate it with Westminster for obvious reasons, but I noticed in those early parade videos, every state official you could think of was in the parade.
Oh, we used to have everybody. Now, Strawn, he showed up every year. And then we had dignitaries. Well, we had the luncheon, but to begin with, the luncheon was at night. It wasn't a luncheon, it was a
Dinner.
banquet, they called it at that point in time. And when you recognize the people, half of the people were not from here, but they had some kind of title in front of their name other than Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah. So their role was to really, or they saw the festival as a way.
They
to
saw it as a way to be known, be seen.
And also show that they
was a very
supported.
good thing, because one time in the last few years, the man that's the state agriculture man came here, and I brought him to this building.
Yeah. I remember him being here.
I talked with him in the luncheon, and he said he would like to see it. So he came on over here, and I walked him over here. I mean, showing him where it was.
Well, thanks.
And now, then the other thing that I know we're going to miss, because Mr. Santa Fe has always closed the luncheon or the banquet with God Bless America.
It's impressive.
And it is impressive. It brings tears to my eyes every year.
No, he's remarkable. When I see him do that, I always think that's something. How do you think, we've talked a little bit about how it's changed over time. Where do you see it going?
I just hope that we can keep the same small town atmosphere and include the things that have happened through the years. It didn't happen overnight. It's not nearly as big as it was at one point in time. But everything changes. Cotton was the king, and that went away. Apples have gone away to a degree. And one thing was, now they have storage for everything, and you ship things all over the world. And of course, we did have things shipped from here, and that was very important at the time for fresh apples, and they came out of here and they went all over. Yeah. But times have changed, and the nice things, the prettiest place, and we went every year, April the 15th, the same day you had to get rid of your money, would be to go and see the original, where the building is built now. There was this beautiful top and barn, and you could just go right there, and you thought you were in paradise, because it was nothing but the pink apple blooms. And just to see it was spectacular. It didn't matter which way you looked, they were there. And we don't have that anymore, but I can remember it, so it's a nice memory to have, which we've had to live on in the last few years, pleasant memories.
Hey, so where was that exactly? You remember?
It's where the new place is, the
Chautauqua
Bell.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's gorgeous. So I can imagine. And I think he's done a good job of.
Oh, he's done it. And see, that's one other thing. That's a business that came in through the Apple Festival, and because, more than likely, he wanted to do that. Yeah. But he has continued with the agriculture and now has added to it.
Yeah.
A very impressive place to go.
I know we've done a lot of research about the growers and what's the history of the industry. And so I think Apple Festival, I think that's its obvious purpose, was sort of the height of the apple industry, and now that it supports the growers, that's still an important thing.
It is an important thing.
We encourage them.